Welcome back to the John Fredericks Show. The Godfather, Senate Leader, Dick Saslaw. Godfather, great to have you back.
John, thanks for having me. And when I was listening to the warm-up, I was wondering how many of your listeners remember 1948 and Harold Stassen.
Probably.
You got a fairly young audience. I remember that famous picture of Truman holding that headline up in the Chicago Tribune.
That's right. When it said
Dewey wins.
No, it's actually Dewey elected president.
Yeah.
But in 1948, I don't know. We go down history lane. It's good to have a history lesson. In 1948, the Republican, the fresh-faced governor of Minnesota, Harold Stassen, was trying to deny Thomas Dewey the nomination. Dewey was a nominee in 44, got annihilated by FDR. And Stassen was basically saying, aren't you tired of these losers? That was his campaign mantra. And he almost pulled it off. But then, of course, Harold Stassen ran for president 19 times, so he became the perennial candidate. Now this Romney, I tell you what, if you're a Democrat and you're listening to this Romney mantra, I mean, you got to be dancing in the streets.
I don't know why they would want to look to him. I mean, they've got, plausible candidates, and, it's in presidential years, it's just a matter of catching the right wave. But, you kind of lose the effect when you bring back a guy who, the voters have seen on numerous occasions.
It's like Weekend with Charlie, as far as I'm concerned. Godfather, let's go to the Phil Puckett situation. Now we know that you were a little bit involved in that. You were upset over it. Now we find out that Terry McAuliffe's chief of staff, Paul Reagan, left a voicemail. Probably not a good idea. Looked like a quid pro quo. Now it's
never a good idea.
Now it's seeped its way into
ask Alec Baldwin.
It's never a good idea to leave that kind of a transcript, and so we've got now McAuliffe involved, now Warner's involved. What do you make of the whole thing?
Well, the public corruption laws, the Washington Post had a story the weekend that broke, and they interviewed, I think, 2 former U.S. attorneys, and they pointed out the public corruption law is aimed chiefly at preventing people in the government or who deal with the government from fattening their wallets at the expense, of the government. And the one guy pointed out, in fact, both of them did, it would kind of be a stretch, since neither, in the Reagan case, neither Reagan or Puckett stood to benefit one iota financially from that. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's anything there. In the case of Warner, he just merely talked with Puckett's son.
Right.
And nothing was ever offered. He said, there were various possibilities, but he never made an offer, and certainly that didn't, corrupt. There was no financial gain, certainly for Warner. And to be honest, what happened, and I'll try to give you the chain of events.
Sure.
That weekend, the governor called me on Friday at about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and I was leaving for California the next day.
Right.
And told me, that he had just found out that Phil was going to resign, I think, on that Sunday.
Right.
And of course, I was a little shocked because when I talked to Phil a few weeks before, to go over where we were in the budgetary process, he says, no problem, I'm with you, 100%. So, I then immediately, called and left a message, with Mark Warner, and then I spoke to Tim Kaine's, chief of staff, Mike Henry, and told him, said, look, you have Tim call and find out what's going on, and I basically left the same message with Senator Warner. And the next day, I flew to California. Mark called me on Sunday and just said that he talked to one of the family members, I think he said that, I'm not sure, but he said that it was too late, that Phil had already resigned. So that's the chain of events. And I don't, see where, I don't see where this has, created a problem, from a legal standpoint.
Now, the investigation first was launched by the feds based on the Republicans with the idea that...
and I think what they were looking at there, and again, I'm not an attorney, is to see whether there was extortion in that case. And I don't know what Phil was making at the bank. Would the position at the Tobacco Commission, was that the quid pro quo if you get out immediately? I don't know. But what is kind of intriguing is that you're talking about one situation and not something that, in the McDonald case, if you remember, you had it was a series of events that occurred apparently over a 1 or 2 year period. This didn't do that. And a lot of times, my understanding is they'll start out in one area, and while they're investigating that area, they uncover something else. And it seems to me that this thing may wind up being more focused on the Tobacco Commission than on the Puckett resignation. But I don't know.
What do you think the real reason is that Senator Puckett resigned?
I've heard a lot of rumors, and I just assume, if you and I talk privately, that's one thing.
Right.
But I just assume not put rumors out there over the airwaves. And you may have heard all the rumors I've heard, John.
Yes, most likely. We hear a lot of them. Senator Saslaw, let's get to the U.S. Senate race. Gillespie, Warner, how do you see this playing out and why?
Mark, here's the thing. Warner has an enormous approval rating, even in Southwest Virginia. And I don't see this thing getting closer than 8 to 10 points at maximum or minimum. And the reason I say that is people still don't know Gillespie. They do know Warner. And you got to remember, as the saying goes, they don't hire the challenger, they fire the incumbent.
Right.
And I just don't see Mark giving them, giving them enough reason to fire them. I mean, he's very likable. You read very few negative stories about him. He's known as a centrist, and that you voted for the ACA or Obamacare, or whatever you want to call it, hardly alters that. I just don't. I don't see that happening. The other thing is the money situation. He's going to be drowning Gillespie out down the final 3 weeks of this campaign. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just, or is it? It's 2 weeks from next
19
Tuesday.
19 days. 19 days.
Yeah. So I mean, his buys on TV. I think for every one ad I've seen for Gillespie, I've seen probably 9 or 10 for Warner, and I just don't see that changing.
You're predicting Warner wins by 8 to 10.
Yeah.
I think he's going to win by 10. So that's kind of where I am in it right now. Things change, but right now I think he wins. He wins by 10, and I think the Sarvis gets under 2%. Let's go to District 10. Barbara Comstock, John Faust. Now, Supervisor Faust, some people thought he would be competitive. I thought he's run a terrible campaign. That's just me. Also, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, they just took $2.8 million out of his TV buy. Should we stick a fork in him? Is he done?
No. It's a district that leans Republican. I don't know what the numbers were in 2012 with the presidential race. I think it may have been slightly carried by. If Obama and Romney regardless of who won, it probably win it by much. But here's the thing: that district is rapidly changing, and in fact, the demographics in Northern Virginia, that circle continues to widen out. Years ago, there was a state senator, Warren Berry, who made a remark back in the early 90s, and I never forgot this. And he said, what he said was that Fairfax, Fairfax and Prince William, and to a lesser degree Loudon, are beginning to take on the voting patterns of Arlington and Alexandria. And he says, and that circle's only going to continue to grow. He's right. Prince William County, as an example, is now a majority minority county. Mm-hmm. Loudon won't get that way for a while, but the development out there, John, of condos and apartments, I mean, they're just springing up all over the place, and it changes the voting patterns of those people that live there in those units tend to be a lot younger and have different thoughts on government than the people who live, on the 1 and 2 acre lots. And I would think that if Faust didn't win it now, and he's been told this by Republicans, he should run again in 2016. The district does lean, I think, Republican.
All right, so make a prediction.
Oh, boy, don't do this to me.
Okay.
It would probably lean, if you were placing a large wager, probably lean slightly towards, but not much, towards Barbara. What mitigates against Barbara is some of the terrible votes that she's cast. The transvaginal, the vote on that. And then, and this is a problem that I have with not just her, but other people that do this. She voted against the money for that Silver Line and then shows up for the ribbon cutting.
Well, it's like...
And that's one of the reasons that the rank-and-file population in this country is kind of fed up with politicians.
Well, they are, and of course, John Faust, no different. Senator Saslaw running around the district with his wife, the doctor, complaining about Barbara Comstock's Medicaid expansion vote, which we don't see eye to eye on. And then, of course, his own wife, we find out, doesn't take Medicaid because she says the system is broken. So it goes both ways. I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to make a prediction. Comstock wins this going away by 6.5. That's what I think is going to turn out there. Now, getting a step beyond that, let's go to... Oh, and by the way, just so our listeners do know, Senator Saslaw knows a little bit about that district because you ran for Congress, if memory serves me properly, in 1984 and got caught in the Mondale blowout.
Mondale Reagan. People tell me, it's interesting, John, I had the 6th closest race in America against a Republican incumbent. And people tell me that had that election for just the congressional seat been held 24 hours after or 24 hours before, I might have won the thing. But you know what? It all works out for the better. I mean, I've had a pretty decent career in the Senate. I've accomplished, some pretty good things. When I look at these guys having to get in that traffic every day and go down 395 and deal with the situation on Capitol Hill, we don't have that in the state Senate. We don't have the hostility that you see on Capitol Hill.
That's true. That's
pretty damned unfortunate.
That is absolutely true. Okay, I've got 1 minute. Let's get to the big picture. As Senator, I have made the over and under on Republican U.S. Senate seats at 8. I think the Republicans are going to take control and gain 8 seats, and I'm taking the over. We just had Senator Chad Peterson on. He took the under. What say you?
51-49 in either direction.
All right, you're going to take the under 51-49. I say Republicans win by 8.
If they pick up
Huh?
If they pick up 8, you're saying they pick up 8, or they have an 8-vote margin?
They're going to pick up 8 seats, is what I'm predicting.
That would be 52-48.
Yes, I'm predicting they pick up
Right.
8 seats.
Well, we're only off by, we're only disagreeing by 1, but
Yeah.
it could go either way. Polling has gotten, it's not the exact science it used to be, strangely enough. And it's simply, because you never know. The turnout is so uncertain these days.
That's always the wild card in these situations.
But, if you just give you an example, and my numbers may be off, but they're not off by very much. In this last governor's race, you take the Barbara Favola Senate District, which about 60% in Arlington, say 30% in Fairfax, and 10% in Loudoun. And in Arlington, she has an enormous amount of apartments. I mean, it's a staggering amount. I think I saw with her like 25 to 27,000 votes cast in the governor's race. In Senator Norman's district, where there may not be a single apartment, there was like 70,000.
Well, you just don't know who's going to turn out. Senator, we're out of time. I got to go to the bottom of the hour news.
Thank you, John. It's good to be back.